Hello，你好，Welcome back，欢迎回来 to Wisdom Wednesday with Johnny Tiger. The date is October 7, 2020. By the way, this weekend will be the Thanksgiving weekend for my Canadian friends and myself. So happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Hope you guys all have a fun time with family. But remember, try to keep safe with that social distancing and all that stuff. Okay, we got to all work together to stay safe so we can have a lot more happy holidays, happy Christmas, Thanksgivings, and so on together. Also, a bit of a quick news. The Johnny Tiger Experience podcast, episode 73, is now live. But if you have not listened to that podcast, it's the best podcast in the world, by the way. It's really worth your while checking it out if I say so myself. Everything you enjoy on these videos will be available on the podcast and much, much more. Well, and with the added bonus that you don't have to look at me while you listen to all the fun stuff that go on with the podcast. Things like Toy Thursday, Wisdom Wednesday, and martial art and self-defense stuff are all there on the podcast with way more details. So, if you have a podcast app, whatever platform you use to play podcast, take a search for Johnny Tiger Experience Podcast, and you will find it. There's a lot there for everyone to enjoy. Also, it is as far as I know, the first and only podcast in the world that have multiple exclusive interviews with blind and visually impaired martial artists from around the world. People, crazy people, just like myself. A lot of them more accomplished than myself. So yeah, just that alone, in my opinion, put the podcast in a very unique niche all on its own. Self-promotion aside, today we are going to continue talking about some of the little interesting facts and confusions and bloopers in the religions in my people, in Chinese culture. Now, I have heard a lot of people criticize Chinese government, how they are reluctant, how they are really strict about keeping religion out of politics, keeping religion out of government, keeping religion and state separate, keeping religion out of school, out of education, out of all that. It is infringing on people's freedom to promote their own religion however, whenever they want, but it is not without good reason. You see, throughout Chinese history, religion has been used as a means of control and conquer by outside forces twice, as far as I can remember. Twice have outside forces came in and tried to conquer China, tried to take over, and they accomplished what they were able to accomplish by using, manipulating, dominating on the religious front. The most modern example of that was when Japanese people first invaded China. Why they were so successful was that prior to their invasion, they had planted the seed of doubt in the heart of commoners in China. And they went about it like a two-pronged attack. Their first line of argument was Japanese people are the real Chinese people. They said that Japanese people had more Chinese blood than Chinese people. They said that Chinese people had been diluted or polluted by the blood of the northern Manchu people that ruled the Qing dynasty. So their argument was, since Japanese people was now more Chinese than Chinese, they should be allowed to come back and reclaim China as theirs. That was the first line of argument. Now, when we listen to this argument right now, it sounds preposterous. But you got to remember, when they were spreading these rumors, there was not a lot of reading materials. There was no internet. There was no way for commoners and civilians to confirm or deny some of these facts. No way for them to double check. And it was done at a time when Chinese people were at their weakest, when China was splintered by many civil wars fought between the Democrats and the other Democrats and the other Democrats and the Communists. The Democrats alone were splintered into more than three different factions, and then there's the Communists on top of that. So China was enveloped in civil war. Chinese people fighting among Chinese people, and civilians were living in fear, living in desperation, living in hardship. And then the Japanese people came in, started handing money around, started treating civilians with uh, politeness and dignity, and then started telling them, we are so nice because we are the true Chinese people, and we are just coming back to save you guys from all this nonsense. That was the first line of attack by the Japanese people on the psychological front. The second line of attack was on the religious front. Japanese people came in and said there were ancient tablets, there were ancient tomes that dictate that Chinese people were going to be ruled by Japanese people, that the Japanese emperor was God's chosen one to rule the world. So they had God on their side, they had tradition on their side, uh, and they had military might on their side. That's why Japanese people were so successful initially. So that was the most modern example of outside forces used the guise of religion to trick civilians into obedience towards them. The previous example, which is what we are talking about today, was when the Manchu people came in, invaded China, took over, and promptly fired the god of war and replaced it with a new god of war. Now, I'm not talking about the god of war like the god of war in the video game. I'm talking about the god of war in the Taoist religion in China. For thousands of years, Chinese people believed in one god when it came to doing battle, having honor and glory in battle. There's one god of war. That god of war was called Yue Fei. Yue Fei, or if I say it with a Chinese accent, Yue Fei. Yue Fei was a real person. He was a big, big hero in the Song Dynasty. Song Dynasty, so we are going back to, well, probably 1000 and about 1200 years ago. 1200, 1300 years ago. Uh, let me backtrack. I said thousands of years, maybe more like hundreds of years. Hundreds and hundreds of years anyway. Chinese people, in their heart, the war god, the god of war, the one guy who brought glory and honor to the people was General Lord Yue Fei. There were Yue temple, Lord Yue temple everywhere. Yue was the one god you would pray to if you are going on a long trip, if you are going out, if you're traveling long distance, and you want to pray for the safety of yourself, safety of your family, for the success of your mission, especially if you are going on a government business, doing things for your country. Lord Yue was the god that you would go and pray to, because he was said to be the most honorable, the most faithful, the most patriotic god among them all. Now, why was this General Lord Yue so adored by Chinese people? A quick little history lesson, although we are not going to go too far into that today. At the end of the Song Dynasty, Mongolian people constantly harassed Chinese border. Of course, for those who know Chinese history, you know that eventually they succeeded and they invaded China and took over and they created the Yuan dynasty, which in the last episode of the Mid-Autumn Festival, we talked about how Chinese people eventually used mooncake as a device to kick Mongolian people out and overthrew the Yuan dynasty. Before the Yuan dynasty, there was the Song dynasty. The Song dynasty started out very strong, but at the end of the Song dynasty, the lord and the emperor himself became very corrupt, and they were always backstabbing each other and trying to uh, use the treasury for their own gains. Civilians lived in hardship and fear because of these politicians, these lords, these barons and dukes and noblemen and the emperor himself were not very caring for their people. On top of that, the Mongolian people constantly invade China. They constantly came over the border, looting, raping, and causing a lot of damage and death. Among all this hardship, only one person and his regiment were able to hold back the tide of the invading Mongolian people. That person was Lord General Yue. It was said that when Yue was but a child, when he was just a child, his mother called him over one night. His mother said, "Kneel down and take off your shirt and turn your back toward me." And with her knitting needle, Yuefei's mother tattooed on his back four words: loyalty, faith, country, sacrifice. She tattooed this by hand. You can imagine back then how painful this was. I mean, I don't. It wouldn't surprise me if Lord Yue got PTSD from that idea. To me, that sounds like child abuse. But his mom did that to him, so he would carry those four words on his back for the rest of his life, and he would always remember that he should be patriotic and be ready to sacrifice himself for his country. In the end, he did. Lord Yue was the only, him and his troop, they were the only force standing between the Chinese people and the Mongolian people. For years and years and years, he fought on the border, holding an action against the invading army, gaining victory after victory against a relentless foe that wanted to crush Chinese people. Eventually, the Mongolian people got tired of messing around with Lord Yue, and they decided to play it smart. They went over his head, bribed a lot of the ministers and high-ranking lords in the Chinese court, and had them convict him of treason and had him executed. Shortly after Lord Yue was executed, the Song dynasty fell to the Mongolian people. Despite of his untimely death, his brave action and his glory against the invading army made him such a folk hero that ever since then, Chinese people adored and worshipped Lord Yue as the god of war, the ultimate god of war, the one force that would stand between Chinese people and any outside force. Fast forward to when the Manchu people invaded China and started the Qing dynasty, the last dynasty in Chinese history, by the way. If anyone ever asks you what the last dynasty was in Chinese dynasty, that's the Qing dynasty. The Manchu people came in and they realized something that the Mongolian people never did. They realized that if we have to rule this massive nation and all these people, we can't do it by force because there are so many of them and so few of us. We were able to catch them by surprise today, but if we let them get their second wind, they are going to throw us out like they did the Mongolian people. So what we have to do is we have to rule with mercy and rule with religion. We have to make it look like that we belong here. To that end, one of the things they decided to do was to get rid of Lord Yuefei's temples. You see, because the Manchu people originally were descendants of the Mongolians and the northern barbarians that Lord Yue spent his whole life fighting. So you can imagine with Lord Yuefei's temple everywhere, reminding Chinese people to be patriotic, to fight the northern barbarians, to fight the Mongolians. In another word, to fight the Manchu. The Manchus would have a hard time establishing any kind of control for a long time. So for them to be accepted by the Chinese people, they had to get rid of Lord Yuefei's temple and Lord Yuefei's memory. How did they do that? They replaced him with another hero, the god of war that every Chinese people, even some non-Chinese people know today, especially people who play the video game The Dynasty Warrior or The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, etc., etc., know about Lord Guan Gong or Lord Guan Yu. Guan Gong, that the word Gong is not part of his name. Gong is like a lord. So Lord Guan or Guan Yu as his proper name. Guan Yu replaced Yue Fei. Now here is the ironic part, because even though Guan Yu was a real person from the period of the Three Kingdoms, we talked about the Three Kingdoms before, the Kingdom of Wei, the Kingdom of Shu, and the Kingdom of Wu. Guan Yu was one of the heroes from the Kingdom of Shu. He was said to be merciless in battle, very honorable, very skilled, very strong. It was said that his sword alone weighed 72 pounds, Although I don't know why you would want to carry a 72-pound sword into battle. But anyway, that was a legend that Guan Yu was so strong that his sword alone was 72 pounds. Ironically, most of Guan Yu's what we know of Guan Yu today came from the novel called Romance of the Three Kingdoms. The real Guan Yu, the real person, never did most of the things people think he did. The real person didn't even look like the way people think he looked. In fact, if you go around most of China and Taiwan and you look at Guan Yu or Guanggang temples, they depict Guanggang as this big, massively huge guy with red hair and red beard. That's how he was described in the book Romance of the Three Kingdoms. However, well, put aside the fact that doesn't look like any kind of a Chinese person. If you go to the hometown, the province of Shanxi, where the original Guan Yu temple still stands today, you will notice that the statue of Guan Yu over there doesn't look anything like how he's depicted anywhere else. The Guan Yu over there look kind of like a normal guy, normal Chinese looking guy with very pale skin. And he doesn't look very big, very muscular, or any of those things. So when the Manchu people started the Qing dynasty, they wanted to replace Lord Yue with a new hero, a new god of war, someone that wouldn't remind Chinese people to be too patriotic. So the perfect choice was Guan Yu or Guan Gong. Why? Because he was from a period of time where China wasn't a solid kingdom. China was splintered into three kingdoms. So Guan Yu, his loyalty was to the kingdom of Shu. He didn't care about a Chinese kingdom, a Chinese country. That's reason number one. He is not a patriotic god. Reason number two, because Guan Yu has been, uh, 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 shall we say, romanticized so much by the book Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Most people have a preconceived idea about him that is far from the true person. People think he's big with red beard, red hair. So this is a fictitious person. Fictitious. Well, this is a real person, but most Chinese people's idea of Guan Yu is fictitious, which make him the perfect person to replace a real hero with. They replace a real folk hero with a fictitious hero who is not patriotic, but who is also very well known for his battle prowess. How did they go about doing that? Obviously, they are not going to make a new law and say no one is allowed to worship Lord Yue. We are going to only let you worship this new person, Lord Guan Yu. No, the Manchu people were smarter than that. They knew if they did that, they would have a riot on their hand right away. So rather than doing that obviously, they paid a lot of the monks and nuns to spread rumors of demonic invasions, of ghosts and evil spirits, uh, causing trouble for villages and towns. And then later, the nuns and monks would come in and uh, make it look like they were invoking Lord Yue. And when nothing happened, they invoked Lord Guan Yu, and then suddenly all the troubles went away. They staged the whole thing. It was through a span of several years, but slowly, but in a very gradual process, the Chinese civilian, remember back then, again, no internet, no way to double check the fact. Whatever the lords tell you, whatever the monks and the religious figure tell you would be taken as fact back then. So gradually, Chinese people came to realize that, hey, every time there's trouble, we pray to Lord Yue Fei, and he doesn't do anything. As soon as we pray to Lord Guan Yu, like the monks tell us to, trouble stop. Our chickens stop going missing. Our cows stop dying. Our houses stop burning down. So hey, Lord Guan Yu must be the real hero. So Chinese people started to shift their focuses away from Yue Fei and started to worship Guan Yu. Gradually, most of the Yue Fei temples were dilapidated and torn down in favor for the newer and bigger, fancier statues and temples for Lord Guan Yu. Which is why today, when you ask, especially young people, young Chinese people, who is the god of war, they tell you it's Lord Guan Gong or Lord Guan Yu. But what they don't realize is that is this was done purely to serve the political game of the Manchu people to be able to rule over a very large group of people in a very large nation. Now we are going to talk about Lord Guan Yu again in the future, either the next episode or the one after that, because he, in addition to being the new sorry, voice cracking. I'm really thirsty. I'm really tired. In addition to being the new god of war, Lord Guan Yu is also one of the money gods in Chinese religion. Thank you for checking out today's Wisdom Wednesday. We'll be back again tomorrow for Yay Toy Thursday. For now, let me go and get my dinner and have a good night. 晚安 and 再见。